Hello and welcome to this video. Now, those viewers out there that go right back to the beginning of this channel will know that the initial interest here was in prog and jazz rock, and I think my love of 70s jazz rock was the thing that sort of made this channel of interest to certain people. Now, as time's gone on and the channel's got bigger and bigger, and now I spend my time, listening to Neil Young and having a go at Van Morrison. Yes, that's it. We're not even a minute in and I've mentioned him for you just to get that out of the way. But I have been, and I'm very aware of this, I have been, ignoring the prog and especially the jazz rock. So I thought today, let's try and get back into the old jazz rock and prog a bit more. I'm going to be doing a lot more on it, I think. Although, I need to keep the views up, you see. That's the thing about us YouTubers. We can't just be coming out and doing whatever we want, because, nobody will watch. So I'm going to say this right at the start. If you do watch this and you have watched it from the start, just check now that you're subscribed. And if you're not subscribed, subscribe, because you've got to support these videos. If this video does loads of views, which I know it won't, then obviously I'll do more like this. Now, why won't it? I'll tell you why. Because I'm not talking about stuff that people know. I'm talking about stuff that people probably don't know. I'm talking about jazz rock, and I'm talking about stuff that even the jazz rock audience might not know. Now, for the hardcore jazz rock fans out there, you may know some of these. I can put you to the test. I'm sure many of you will. And some of you will think, well, these are masterpieces, and I agree. What we have here are 10 jazz rock masterpieces you've never heard. In brackets, probably, stroke, ranked. That's the full title. That's what I'm going to go with right now. I've got 10 here. They're taken from my collection because recently I did my 10 most wanted albums. And I knew that let a lot of normal viewers down because I didn't realise it, but all but one were jazz rock albums. That's all I'm interested in reality. Right, that's why you're not going to get a fair review out of your Van Morrisons and Neil Youngs, singer-songwriters and Americana, because I'm not into that. I'm into funky fusion. I'm into Moog synthesizers, fast guitar solos, drummers playing all over the place with a sort of funky, hyped up James Brown stroke Billy Cobham approach. I want tunes that are named after sort of science fiction stuff, or maybe some cliched name or phrase that we use sort of in everyday use. That's often the usual approach, and we'll try and spot some of those. That's something I've never really spoken about. It's if you went, say, cut and run, that's a phrase, isn't it? And when you're dealing with instrumental jazz rock, that'll be a great title for a track, wouldn't it? Cut and run, or I don't know. What else? Just name some phrases. You did well to come up with one there, didn't you, Andy? It's not easy, but phrases. I don't know. Let the dog see the rabbit. Now that would be more down the British jazz rock avenue, which is a bit more quirkier and weird. And that's an aspect of jazz rock that even I don't cover enough. There's not enough videos on here about Backdoor and Nucleus, is there? So I've also tried to represent some of those sort of subgenres within the genres. Anyway, you understand how it goes. I've Trod Water. There's another one. Treading Water. That'd be quite good. Treading Water. That'd be more sort of your Herbie Hancock and Mum and Dishy type of name, Or you could just name it after random animals as well, like, giraffes. That would be a good name for jazz. I mean, really, naming jazz rock tunes. That'll be the subtext of this. We will go looking for those pointless names for jazz rock albums named after, random animals, or I've said a bit that. So even if this is a little bit boring, at least you got that to look forward to. Is me pulling out a little bit of humour out of these albums. But these are amazing albums. These are 10 brilliant, I would almost say, well, not for all of them, but for most of them, masterpieces. 10 jazz rock masterpieces you've never heard, in brackets probably, stroke ranked. Right, I've said that twice. Right, so at number 10, I've got this recent acquisition, which I have been obsessed with since I had it. It's this one here. Yeah, look at the state of that cover. Incredible psychedelic cover. Have I got it round the right way? Yes, I have. So this is an album by Larry Coryell. Now, Larry Coryell is the godfather of jazz rock fusion. Without him, he laid the groundwork for it. We probably would have it, mind you. But, he was so important. If there's one guy that invented jazz rock, if you just wanted to pick one, it would probably be Larry Coryell. And I had an email off a viewer yesterday, and they were telling me all this stuff about the early surf bands that Larry Coryell played in, and sending me photos and all sorts of really fascinating stuff about early Larry Coryell. And I think this makes a really important point. Larry Coryell, I think, discovered rock and roll, surf rock, doo-wop, and then country music, and then the Beatles and all of that while studying jazz. He was like the perfect age in the perfect place to be exploring those two things at once. Now, the thing with Larry Coryell, here's the thing I love about him, is he plays with abandon. He ain't interested in perfection whatsoever. He just goes for it. And I always feel like there's a great smile on his face where he launches himself into ideas that sometimes he can pull off and sometimes he can't. And that's extremely exciting. But because of that and all the multifarious concepts he's had over the years, right, all the different areas he's played in, his absolute love for all aspects of music has made him make a lot of albums that are not they're interesting. That's the thing, they're interesting, but they're not masterpieces. I feel that there's a whole bunch of interesting albums in the 60s, moving up to some albums in the early 70s, most notably Barefoot Boy and Offering, which I think are two of the greatest jazz rock albums ever made. Then he goes and does the 11th House, which, although a little bit derivative, the use of trumpet within that sort of Mahavishnu, Return to Forever type of jazz rock group is very interesting. He then goes off to, making like acoustic guitar albums with Philip Catherine, or jazz guitar albums with Emily Remless, somebody that said I've never mentioned on the channel, an incredible talent, which would be a household name if she hadn't succumbed to drug addiction and died very young. And I think Larry Coryell's substance abuse also kept him from the mainstream. Now, this album's interesting because the Vinyl Vulture came to see me the other day. You all know the Vinyl Vulture, an old mate of mine who's now YouTubing, and I love his channel and he's into his records, and he'd picked this one up and he didn't like it. And he says, oh, you can have this. I thought, well, this is probably I like the cover. I mean, look at the cover. Look at this. It's incredible. Incredible 60s psychedelic cover. Look at this. It looks like a major release. And when you open it up, we get a lovely inner sleeve here, which I will pull out. Look at this. A real incredible major release. We've got notes all about it. It says nada. The universal sound current, span nothing void. About the nada, the scriptures, says God. What's he going on about here? It's all sorts of stuff going on here. It looks very much of his time, This was recorded in 1978, which was a period for Larry where I think actually he was doing some really, really interesting stuff, and some of his solo guitar stuff of that period is like sort of the sort of solo Keith Jarrett stuff, but on guitar. It's quite incredible. He's an incredible musician, one of my favourite musicians. Now, this one, I think, Larry Coryell and the Brubeck Brothers, Better Than Live. That's what it's called. And we have on here a collaboration between himself and then we've got Darius Brubeck on piano, Rhodes clarinet, Arp Odyssey. We got Chris Brubeck on electric bass and Dan Brubeck on drums. Now, in Dave Brubeck's later years, he did go out with his sons playing jazz. Now, we don't want to think that Dave Brubeck's sons are so talented that they can all be that great, but they sort of are. And this is something that I think it's a shame, really. Most of us know them, if we do know them at all, for playing on the later Dave Brubeck albums. and they do a very competent job, but here they feel let off the loose, and this is blistering psychedelic jazz rock. I know why the Vinyl Vulture didn't like it, because it's so unfocused and out there. They are really playing. The solos go on for a long time, and Larry Coryell's solos are very exploratory, shall we say. But the playing from the brothers, I don't like saying that, it's hard to say, is brilliant. I think this is actually one of I think this is one of Larry Coryell's great albums, and unlike many of the albums he made, the production is fantastic. The compositions are varied. There's lots of funky mad fusion, but there's lots of other stuff as well, acoustic moments. And the more I listen to it, the more I think that this is one of Larry Coryell's greatest albums, and a real last hurrah for fiery jazz rock fusion at the end of the 70s, when everybody else was succumbing to the old disco and Fuzak, weren't they? So that's who I've got at number 10. Right, let's move on to number 9. Number 9, I thought, let's champion some British jazz. So I went searching for my Nucleus albums and my Backdoor albums, and I was having a good think about it, and I thought, oh, you know, what about some of the early Holsworth albums, you know? Then what about Colosseum or Colosseum 2? Now, these albums are known, especially Colosseum 2, the ones with Gary Moore. They're incredible, fiery, almost like heavy metal jazz rock. And John Heisman did some incredible stuff, but so did his wife, Barbara Thompson. And then I thought, you know, end of the 70s, especially after her input on, you know, Andrew Lloyd Webber's and his brother Julian Lloyd Webber's variations, Barbara Thompson actually, in my country, moved over to the mainstream a little bit, and she released around about 1978, I assume, this could be 76. Let's see if I can find it out before I show it you. She released this solo album, 1978. Again, a strange year. In the UK here, we had a lot of prog hitting the mainstream, contrary to sort of the cultural narratives that said prog was over after punk. Now, we got War of the Worlds, we got that aforementioned variation. Sky were bloody all over the television and in the charts. And there was a place for British jazz musicians to get major label deals. This is on MCA Records, and produce some well-produced, well-composed, well-played albums, and that's what you have here. This is Barbara Thompson's Paraphernalia. Now, I have listened to this for quite a long time. I had bits of this on tape when I was a kid off the radio. It's only recently I've been able to pick up this vinyl copy of it. And all this time, the incredible drumming on here, I thought was John Heisman, but no, actually, looking recently, I realised that we've got Barbara Thompson on tenor, alto, soprano, saxes and flute, but we've also got Colin Dudman on keyboards, Roy Babington, the great Roy Babington, on bass guitar, and on drums, Harold Fisher. This is well composed, it's well played, it doesn't fall into the pitfalls of jazz rock at that time. And you have to understand, 78, 79, that's my favourite era for production. It hasn't got all digital, the DX7s haven't come in, everyone's not using samplers and sequencers, and yet the multi-track recording studios were at their peak and the engineers knew what they were doing. And when you get a good album from this time, that sort of tightness, you know, that tightness in production, you know, that you'd associate with an album like, I don't know, Asia by Steely Dan. These albums all have that sound. This is excellent, and I ummed and ahed about this one, to be honest, and I literally just put it on before the video, and as soon as the needle hit, I went, oh yeah, this is incredible, this is what I love. Tight, funky, fiery played, good compositions, and a sort of abandon that I love jazz rock to have. That's what we've got at number 9. Right, I am, as you know, a huge fan of the drummer Narada Michael Walden. He is my lord and master as far as drumming is concerned, and he has played on so many legendary jazz rock albums, whether it be Black Market by Weather Report, or Visions of the Emerald Beyond by the Mahavishnu Orchestra, or Jeff Beck's Wired, and these are all sort of mainstream. If we were doing the 10 greatest jazz rock albums, all of those 3 albums could well be on there. Narada really hits high as a jazz rock drummer in terms of classic albums, doesn't he? But for us Narada fans, there is one which is a little bit more cult, a little bit harder to get hold of, and it is this slice of, is it Italian prog? Italian jazz rock? Nova, Vimana. Incredibly produced, incredible lineup on here. So Vimana, I think they're an Italian jazz rock band. I don't know it that well. They came to the States mid-70s, recorded a couple of albums. This is the one I love and the one I have. And the lineup is quite, it's an incredible lineup on here. We've got Narada Michael Walden on drums, but he's also playing Fender Rhodes piano on the tune Princess and the Frog, a real classic jazz rock tune there. But we've got the great Corrado Rusticchi on lead guitar. One of those sort of heirs to that high-powered velocity, sort of John McLaughlin, Al Di Meola approach on guitar. And I think Corrado then went on to do a lot of session work for Narada on a lot of pop albums in the 1980s. But this is probably the best example if you want to get into some Corrado Rusticchi. He was a great guitarist. On saxophone, we got Elio Diana. And on keyboards, we've got Renato Rosset. Now, I think that's the basic Italian group there. But it's fleshed out by some incredible guests. Along with Narada Michael Walden, we have from Brand X, Percy Jones. On percussion, we've got Phil Collins. We've got on extra percussion, I think congas actually is quite interesting. We've got Zakir Hussain, and it's produced by Robin Lumley from Brand X. There is the band there for you to have a look at. And this is interesting. There's vocals on here. And you know when you put vocals on a jazz rock album, it can always be a bit meh. And if I have a little bit of a meh about this album, it's probably that. But the playing's incredible, and Narada is, as always, off the scale. And of course this was made in 1976. It's recorded beautifully, and Narada's drums just sound incredible. So for Narada fans, that is an essential purchase. So that's what we've got at number 8. Right, early jazz rock. You know, we could trace jazz rock perhaps back to, I don't know, maybe Cantaloupe Island by Herbie Hancock, you know, mid-60s. The problem with jazz rock is that rock music is made out of jazz. And so the jazz is there from day one, really. And so as rock develops off the impetus of the improvisational possibilities of jazz. So, you know, if you listen to a seminal band that's really creating rock music, like, I don't know, The Byrds, for example, you listen to that first album and you get Tambourine Man, but 3 albums is on, I think on the 3rd album they're doing, is it 8 Miles High? I always never know whether it's 8 Miles High or 5 Miles High. I think I get confused because the Chick Corea tune, 500 Miles High. So if it's 500 Miles High, then The Byrds, it's going to be 8 Miles High. And I would say that also is almost like an early example of jazz rock fusion. Larry Coryell, Gary Burton, Steve Marcus, they're all playing their part in creating this form of music, but it's very up and down. And even by 1970, 1971, no one has really worked out how to do jazz rock fusion until the Mahavishnu Orchestra come along, and then you get Billy Cobham and Herbie Hancock nailing the more funkier side, and then we're in. So it really takes till around about 73, 74 for jazz rock to be successfully sort of sketched out as a form of music. One of the pioneers is a flute player called Jeremy Steig. Now, Jeremy Steig is an interesting flute player. He emerges in the late 60s. He has a group called Jeremy and the Satires, which is a very early fusion band. And then he starts producing some albums, which some of them are not that great. But there's one album that is incredible. I think it was made in 1970. Now, that album, I think, is called Energy or Power. I've never been too sure what it's called. You go, what are you talking about? You don't even know what the name of the album is. I'll tell you why, because for me, this is an album I bought very early on. In the 1980s, when I first started buying albums, there was a series of Italian reissues of various jazz albums. And the one I have here is this one, which I just know as Jeremy Steig, Jan Hammer, Don Elias, Eddie Gomez, and it's got the tracks Home, Cake, Swamp Carol and Energy. So I'm assuming this was originally released as the album Energy. There's a few of these around at that time, and I think there's another one with this lineup which is equally as good, but this for me has always been a masterpiece. This is one of the great jazz rock albums of all time. Jan Hammer is here pre-Mahavishnu Orchestra. He's playing electric piano and he's doing all the stuff on electric piano that he does on In a Mountain Flame. He's distorting it, bending the notes. He's got like bloody ring modulation on there. He's doing the whole lot. Jeremy Steig is just, the flute playing is just, he's got that Rasson Roland Kirk sort of overblown percussive approach to the flute. Don Elias, he's such a groovy drummer. And we have to remember that when Miles was making Bitches Brew and he was recording Miles Runs the Voodoo Down, neither Lenny White or Jack DeJohnette were able to nail that sort of groove that Miles wanted. And Don Elias, who was playing percussion, actually jumped onto drums and plays that groove. And Don Elias has an approach to groove which is so heavy here, backed up by the incredible Eddie Gomez. This is an incredible lineup, and this really is one of the great jazz rock albums. It's hypnotic, it's trippy, the sound's great, the big sort of thick drums, the funkiness of Hammer's electric piano playing. You know I love Jan Hammer. He's going to crop up in a minute on this list, as you probably have guessed. You know, I think a lot of his fusion stuff is unsung, but this really is, I think it is called Energy in its original form. I have this version here. This is one of the great masterpieces. Right, so I've now pulled out a couple of CDs as well. For those of you who love the obscurity and want something new to check out, I've got an album here which I wish I knew more about, but my God, this is an incredible masterpiece of out there jazz rock. Right, it is the band Phase, and the album is called Midnight Madness. Now, the great Ken Golden, that often appears on Sea of Tranquility, also runs Laser's Edge, and he actually sent me this, knowing what I like. He does this every now and then. He sent me this. I thought, what the hell's this? And I put it on, and this is basically a bunch of kids who love jazz rock, could really play. They locked themselves in their house for about a year, worked out the most insane jazz rock album, and then they basically got the money, found a label, and they went and recorded this. It came out, of course, nobody bought it, and Ken's since gone on to reinstate this. So if you want to go over to Laser's Edge and pick this up, because there's nothing like this in the world of jazz rock. This is like 70s do-it-yourself jazz rock, and the playing it's so fiery. There's a lot of sort of the tempos on here go up and down all over the place. You know, I love all that. This precision that's come into modern jazz and jazz rock has killed it. This is very, very exciting. Now, I've been chatting to Ken last night, actually. I woke up in the middle of the night not being able to sleep because I've got this CPAP thing that I'm trying to bloody get used to. And I keep waking up, and I went online. And he said to me, I've got a copy of Sabelle. Now, if I had that, that would be on the list. Herman Sabelle's only album. Is it a jazz rock album? I don't know. But he said he's going to kindly send me over that album. So to pay him back if I can, please Google Laser's Edge. Go over to there. Have a look at the albums. Ken has done a brilliant job of re-releasing old albums which are monumental, and you will find more than I can ever cover there. And in the next few days I'm going to be covering another album that he is, a new band. It's a band called Polymath, actually. They're from Brighton, and he's released an album for them. I will be doing a review of that, but this is very, very exciting. Prog metal, jazz rock, experimental music, very, very exciting. So, you know, Ken's doing the job of trying to get that music out there. But yeah, if you want to own a really obscure jazz rock album, there you go. Right? Now, subgenres. We've looked at British jazz. There is a subgenre for me in the world of jazz rock, which is the post-Bitches Brew albums made by a variety of artists. So when Miles Davis comes out with Bitches Brew and he creates that sort of psychedelic tumbling, sort of voodoo-esque, you know, dark, you know, way of playing jazz and rock, which is nothing like the Mavish Nutshire or Weather Report. In its wake, there's a number of artists that carry on in that vein. Weather Report carry on in that vein, actually, and I think their first album is very much in the area. I call it electric jazz. That's what I call it. A little bit of Silent Way and a little bit of Bitches Brew. Joe Zawinul's first solo album, Zawinul, also is a masterpiece in this style, as is the Mwandishi albums by Herbie Hancock. They all seem to be in the shadow of Bitches Brew. But there's one album, I think, that really is at the peak of the intent of what Miles was trying to do. This was it done the best it ever was done. And it is Julian Priester's Peppo Matoto Love, Love. There it is. This is an incredible album. On ECM Records, beautifully recorded. Julian Priester is, of course, trombone player, came up in the 1960s, part of the free jazz movement. And so this is made more interesting by him exploring this sort of electric jazz genre. We have on here Pat Gleason, who was the guy that was working with Herbie Hancock on those Mwandishi albums to create all the mad synthesizer sounds. We've also got Hadley Kellerman on flute, saxophones and bass clarinet. We've got Bayete on pianos and clavinets. We've got Miyimbo Henry Franklin on basses. We've got the incredible Ndugo Leon Chancellor on drums. There is also an appearance from Mugwanda David Johnson on flute. We've got Eric Gravatt on drums. So you're saying, well, there's two drummers on here. There's basically only two tracks on here. On the original, it was one long side epic, and then on side two, another side long epic. We've got Ron McClure on Fender bass, but most notably, we have on this album an appearance of Bill Connors on electric guitar. Now, Bill Connors is a fascinating player, isn't he? Turns up on the first Return to Forever album, Hymn to the Seventh Galaxy, and for many people, his input on guitar was always the greatest. He had a sort of an abandon that looked sort of channeled John McLaughlin. There was a sort of wild Hendrix aspect to his playing, and he played in a way which is absolutely wonderful. He was then drafted in onto the second Stanley Clarke album, playing in what was possibly the greatest lineup that never was: Tony Williams, Jan Hammer, Stanley Clarke and Bill Connors on that self-titled album. We all know he plays off the scale on that, and then he changes tack and he goes down the acoustic guitar route, doesn't he? And he does some incredible albums on ECM, starting with Theme to the Guardian. And his style completely changes as he adapts to an all fingerstyle approach. And that wild electric guitar playing in the early 70s, you know, that's it. He comes back on electric guitar in the 1980s with a trio with Kim Plainfield, I believe, on drums, and does a number of albums, most notably Assembler, which are great fusion albums, but he seems to have decided to channel Alan Holdsworth. When I say channel, I could just say copy. I mean, it's a copy of Alan Holdsworth, and the approach is so different to that sort of wild abandon we heard on those early albums. And, you know, I think Alan Holdsworth, when he heard these albums, said, he goes, I really like Bill Connors, but I liked him when he sounded like Bill Connors, and I agree. Now, on here, this is made in 1974, same year as the Stanley Clarke album. Bill Connors is still in that electric guitar sound that we love. This is the third album. Now, the playing isn't off the scale like those other two albums, but it is that, but it's this channeled into a much more sort of, I suppose, avant-garde, freer approach. Bill Connors does a brilliant job, and actually he's brilliant because he doesn't step on anybody's toes. Now, this album, look, it's the water's got into it. Look at it. I bought this. It cost me a bloody load of money, and I don't know how, but look at it. I mean, what can I do? Well, I hate that. I need to get this on vinyl, really. I hate these bloody CDs. I mean, I don't know. But yeah, that is an absolute masterpiece. And that's what we've got at number 5. Or was it number 6? Can't remember. Number 6, right? We're now getting into absolute unadulterated masterpieces now. Unadulterated masterpieces. Now, another musician like Jeremy Steig that was pioneering jazz rock throughout the 70s and actually making a whole host of really incredible albums was Barry Miles, who's probably most notable for sort of taking on board Al Di Meola, very young Al Di Meola, and sort of training him up a little bit for Return to Forever. And then Barry Miles would appear on many Al Di Meola albums. That's probably where you know him from the incredible keyboard playing he did on Land of the Midnight Sun. But he does a number of fusion albums, and as time's going on, I am becoming more and more fascinated by the 70s Barry Miles fusion albums. Now, a viewer who I was chatting to extensively last night, and their knowledge of this is quite astounding stuff he was telling me, sent me this up. Now, this is an album called Fusion Is. It was recorded around about 78, I believe. 77, came out 1978. Right, this I have been playing continually. So Mark, who sent me this, I thank you so much. All the albums he sent me up were incredible. In fact, it promoted a video. And I've been sent albums by many viewers, and I've actually created my own rack of albums. They're all in there, and I do want to get through them, listen to them, and then try and feature them on the channels, you know. But all the albums that Mark sent up were like just incredible, and they were so obscure. This one I thought I knew, but I didn't. This is a later Barry Miles album. I've been listening to it. This is just, it's a masterpiece. This is as good as anything. Do we ever go back Billy Combs Spectrum, or, you know, Birds of Fire by the Mavish Orchestra, Tony Williams' Lifetime? This is equal to that. The playing is incredible on here. The soloing's incredible. They do absolutely everything. They're funky, they're out there. It's really complex. Some of the complexity is sort of Return to Forever level complexity. The soloing is free. There's swinging stuff. Barry Miles is playing acoustic piano, but he's also playing Moog synthesizer and doing all that stuff. Vic Juris on guitar is astonishing. Like, it's a guitar performance that in 1977 is equal, if not beyond, the heavy hitters like Al Di Meola and John McLaughlin. This is a real absolute masterpiece. I've only been listening to it for the last couple of weeks. I can't stop putting it on. The production's amazing. It's just an incredible album, and I'm so annoyed. I've done so many top 10s on jazz rock over the years and explored so many different aspects of it, and I'm going to do it again. But doing this channel, you do come across albums, or you get sent albums that are absolutely incredible. Now, you'll notice everything I've picked is sort of 70s. Well, it's all 70s, except for one album. Now, the truth is, in the 1980s, jazz rock, I mean, you're really scrapping around to find a truly masterpiece jazz rock album in the 1980s. I think, especially without getting weird, you can go towards the M-bass stuff. That's amazing. Some of the Laswell stuff's great. Ornette Combs Prime Time, that's pretty great. Pat Metheny, of course, he's doing his thing. Schofield, you know, Mike Stern, they're all there, aren't they? But, you know, the 80s production often bloody affects stuff, you know. So it's difficult to come up with the greatest jazz rock albums from the 1980s. I don't think any of them have that sort of abandon and sort of fiery out there-ness, because by the 1980s everybody wanted to play in a really neat and tidy way, you know, and it all goes all GRP, Chicorea's electric band, doesn't it? But doing this channel and going down so many different rabbit holes, I've discovered an utter masterpiece. I wanted to talk about it on this channel. I've placed it at number 3 on this list, and it's probably the most obscure album I'm about to show you, and it is Slaughter on Shaftesbury Avenue by the incredible Brian Godding. All right? Brian Godding is a British jazz rock guitar player, like, you know, Doug Boyle and John Etheridge. There's a whole host of these monsters, John Goodsall. And I went one night down the rabbit hole and I came across this guy who's most notable for playing guitar in Centipede, the early sort of jazz rock prog band that was Keith Tippett's band, I believe, a sort of big band avant-garde jazz group. Now, being the guitarist in Centipede does not make you a household name, but Brian Godding's done various things, you know, over the years. But in the 1980s, oh yeah, he played with Magma. He might be on a Magma album as well. That's his claim to fame, Brian Godding. But he's incredible. He's got a sound all of his own. He has all that virtuosity you associate with a jazz rock guitarist, but it's his own thing going on. I read about this album and I thought, go and check it out. So I did. And I managed to get it on CD. There's a note on the back of here. It says, and it's a review by Dave Wayne, who wrote in the Gibraltar Encyclopedia of Progressive Rock. It said, this is intense jazz rock fusion of the highest quality. It is. Godding's guitar playing should please fans of Holdsworth and McLaughlin to no end. I'm one of those fans, and he has pleased me. Heartily recommended to all fusion fans. On CD for the first time, rare fusion, a rare fusion classic from ex-Magma guitarists, and it features unreleased bonus tracks. This is like this is just what's it sound like, Andy? What's it sound like? You know, who's on it? What's it? What is it? This is like bloody essential. I think it must have been a double album. It goes on for so long. The tracks are long. They're really composed, so they go through all different aspects, but they're not over-composed. There's long solos, but they develop, and just when you think they're in a jam, you realise they're not. It'll be like Weather Report, but this is fiery, it's heavy, the playing is out there. Lineup, we got Brian Godding on guitar, Steve Lamb on bass, Dave Sheen on drums, and keyboards by Steve Bull. Not the bloke from Wolverhampton Wanderers. May have been, I don't know. I don't know enough about it to tell you. It was recorded at the Dungeon in London in 1986. I'm basically reading what's on here. And there's a whole bunch of write-up on here. And that's all I really know about it. Right? And it's all, this is incredible stuff. My copy here, I bought it second hand off eBay. There's the CD there. And somebody's written... There's a picture of Brian Godding, and he's holding this guitar the wrong way around, and somebody's put strange. I'm scraping the battle to tell you stuff, the bottom of the barrel, sorry, to tell you stuff about this album. Now, Brian Godding, I believe, I keep doing this to musicians, I think he did pass away. I do apologise if he hasn't passed away, and if he is still around, and if anybody knows Brian Godding, or anybody that knows anything of any of the musicians on this album, I want to do a whole video on this album, but I need one of the guys associated. I need someone to tell me what's going on. So you know who you know and who you are. You know, put the feelers out. Anybody who's got any Brian Godding facts, let's put it in here, because this is a forgotten masterpiece. It's still out there on CD, so it'd be nice to sell some. This is on the label Wild Places, right? This is a masterpiece, one of the great jazz rock albums of all time. Now, what inspired this video, and I'm at number 2 now, was a video by the Vinyl Vulture. Now, because he'd given me that Larry Coryell album, and that had inspired me, and a couple of days ago, go and check him out, the Vinyl Vulture. I'll try and remember to put a link in the description. He did 10 great albums that you've probably never heard, and he put forth an album that I'd played him recently, And he obviously went away and went, oh my God, it is a masterpiece. Because he does love his jazz rock, Old Vinyl Vulture. And it is this. Now, this, for us jazz rock fans, is probably the most well-known album on here. But in the grand scheme of things, I think this is about as good as it gets. This is as strong as any of the Mahavishnu Orchestra albums. Jan Hammer is off the scale on here. I have championed this album so many times. This is intense, funky, flashy fusion, odd time signatures. Jan Hammer is playing off the scale. The lineup is incredible. Stephen Kindler on electric violin, who played with the Mahavishnu Orchestra on Vision of the Emerald Beyond. He plays off the scale. Mr. Kindler did get in touch with me a couple of years ago. I was hoping to do an interview with him, but he didn't really talk to me that much. And if he's watching this, then it was very interesting. He sent me one day, I was out on a gig and I saw something appear in my Facebook Messenger, and he just sent me this track. I assume it was him playing the violin. It was unbelievable. So I don't know what's happened to Stephen Kindler. Somebody says he lives somewhere in Europe and he's grown a great big beard. But that's quite common to grow a great big beard. We shouldn't think anything of that fact. But Stephen Kindler, you know, unsung violin genius, really. Fernando Saunders on bass. He's off the scales, also playing piccolo bass, and we got the incredible Tony Smith on drums. They're singing on it. There's a couple of songs on here. Now, I have to also champion, because even more than this album, and I don't know if the Vinyl Vulture has heard this album that I'm about to mention now, they followed this up with an album worth of an album full of pop songs, believe it or not, called Melodies. And it should be the worst album ever made, but it's not. It's one of the greatest albums ever made, and I love it even more than this. There are jazz rock bits on that album, but whether it would be classified as an unknown jazz rock album, I don't know. So I've put that one here instead, this one in here instead. But also, if you haven't heard Melodies, go and check it out, because it will blow you away even more. That was number 2. Right, so we get to number 1. This is without doubt the greatest jazz rock album that no one's ever bloody heard. Some of you will know it. An utter masterpiece. I think if I was to do the platonic 10 greatest jazz rock albums now, and I'm probably going to have to, because I'm probably going to have to rethink what's on that list, right? But I don't know with this. There's a part of me that think that this could well be the greatest jazz rock album ever made. Right, if you take jazz rock to be the summation of what the Mahavishnu Orchestra did, what Weather Report did, what Frank Zappa did, what Billy Cobham did, what Herbie Hancock did, if you take up all of that and then you think about the musicians that sort of coalesce around this, and the compositional approaches, the production approaches, and as I said, 78, 79, the production at that point is so incredible that when musicians bother to do something of musical worth, it's stunning, and that's what we have here. This album is by John Serry Jr, and it is Exhibition. Now, on my list of albums I wanted, I'd mention Jazz Is, that was released after that, and that is equally great, except that here I just love the tightness of the recording. John Serry Jr looks so cool there. It's a brilliant cover. It's just a brilliant album. Care to Dance, Acting Up, Nicole, Sabotage, Exhibition, Just for Kicks, Mouse March, all unbelievable. All selections composed and arranged and orchestrated by John Serry. Should say John Serry Jr. So he's not confused with his dad, John Serry, who I believe was a famous accordion player. So he comes from a musical family. This was recorded at Electric Lady Studios. It's released on Chrysalis. It's all bells and whistles, and the lineup is quite incredible. John Serry is playing piano, Fender Rhodes, Yamaha CS80, ARP Odyssey, clavinet. He does the voice that he on Acting Up is him. He plays all the instruments on Just for Kicks, including, drum kit, assorted mallets and toy percussion. John Serry Jr. is a serious percussionist and drummer, and that sort of approach, especially the vibraphone approach, makes this sound like a very, very intense Fusac album. like a Larry Carlton album and maybe a David Sample album, but imagine amping that up and making it so unbelievably complex, but then bringing in this heavy percussion aspect to it, with the sort of xylophone runs and orchestration that make it feel almost like a Zappa album at the same time. And then with some of the best fusion musicians of the world playing at the top of their game, the lineup's quite incredible. Bob Shepherd on alto, soprano and tenor saxophones. The incredible Barry Finnerty from the Brecker Brothers. Imagine the Brecker Brothers that you have force-fed like speed. That's what this is like. We've got George Johnson, it says, on electric basses. No, Gordon Johnson on electric basses. We've also got Carlos Vega on drum kit. Now, Carlos Vega was one of the greatest drummers that ever lived. Sort of session guy, sort of similar style and period to, say, Jeff Porcaro, precursor sort of that incredible Dave Weckl approach to fusion drumming. Carlos Vega, I believe, unalived himself, as we say on YouTube, at some point, which is, I think, this always either makes you a legend or you fall into obscurity. I think when I did my unappreciated and underrated drummers, Carlos Vega was on this. The follow-up has got Peter Erskine on, that's great, but Carlos Vega he has this heavy, sort of almost Latin American approach to the drums. Perfect drum on here, perhaps his greatest performance of all time, I don't know. We got Gordon Gottlieb on vibraphone and xylophone and all that. We've got singers, Nancy Shanks is on here. Incredible album. So that's what my number one is, and we are at the end of the video. So I hope you appreciated this 10 greatest jazz rock albums you've never heard, in brackets probably line ranked. So I did quite well there, don't I? A job well done, I would say, wouldn't you say? Got a lot in there, 45 minutes. Very good. So I think we'll finish there. So obviously, like and subscribe, support these, put loads of comments in, make sure that YouTube doesn't go, oh, Andy's gone on and done some bloody esoteric jazz rock fusion prog talk, and we really need him saying how much he hates, I don't know, bloody Barry Manilow, you know. I don't hate Barry Manilow. I think he's bloody brilliant. Proper jazz player, you know, Barry Manilow is. Proper player. So I ain't going to be doing any hate towards Barry Manilow. Now, I reserve that for the sort of pretentious types who think they can get away with just strumming a few chords and playing some sort of horrible sound that we are supposed to think is good because it's a bit weird and punky. That's what I don't like. And you didn't get that on this one, did you? You got a whole host, big dose of jazz rock albums, and if you are knowledgeable, you're probably going to go, well, I've got 8 of those, and I will check out the other 2. But for many of you, hopefully, you can now rush off. I think I might actually put the list, I never normally do this, but I will put the list here in the description as well. So it's a bit easier for you to have a look and then go and check them out yourselves. And if you haven't heard them, go and check them out and then report back here and tell me what you think. Thanks for watching. See you on the next video.